Types of stones that were used in ancient Egypt. Nature loved the land of Egypt for many types of beautiful stones, some of which are milk and some that are solid, which made Egypt the birthplace of the stone industry and its use all over the world. It is not surprising, then, if we find Egypt the greatest nation in the world in mastery and skill in the art of building. It struck a right arrow in this regard since the earliest times, especially since it had reached the use of copper machines to cut it since the prehistoric era. As a result of this came the use of stones in construction since the era of the First Dynasty, as we mentioned when talking about art, and we will talk here first about the stones that the Egyptian used in building, and then we will follow that talk about the stones that he used to make utensils, statues, and furniture. Then we single out a special chapter for the stones that the Egyptian used to consider precious, or semi-precious, some of which are not considered so in our view today. The most important building blocks are white limestone. It is abundant in the hills that line the Nile Valley from Cairo to just beyond the city of Esna. It is also found in various points between Esna and near Aswan. For example, it is found on the river bank in Faris, next to the chain, and near Kamambo. As for Lower Egypt, it is found near Alexandria at El Max and in the vicinity of Suez, and the Egyptians continued to use this type of stone, until the middle of the 18th dynasty, when at that time it was replaced by a large number of sandstone, but its use was not neglected at once, as it was used by Seti I in building most of his temple with the buried godmother, and in some parts of the temple of Ramses II in this spot as well. In addition to that, some tombs of all ages were carved into the rocks of this stone, as seen in Giza, Saqqara, Thebes, and others. And the best types of this stone had special quarries from which they were cut, such as the quarries of Torah, Al-Masra I, and Al-Jabalan, whose ancient ruins can be seen to this day. In the quarries of Torah, inscriptions dating back to the 12th dynasty and extending to the 30th dynasty were found. However, we have documents and inscriptions indicating that the cutting of stones from Torah dates back to the 4th dynasty. In building the monuments of Saqqara since the 3rd dynasty, and certainly since the 1st dynasty, as some stones from Torah were found included in the buildings of this period. As for the quarries of the mill, the inscriptions on them date back to the 18th dynasty until the Ptolemaic era. In the quarries of the two mountains, we find inscriptions from the 19th dynasty until the Roman era. There are other quarries with pharaonic inscriptions. In Al-Barsha, for example, we find a quarry with a cartouche from the 30th dynasty. 5 Near Al-Araba, ancient quarries were found. In Ko al-Kabir 6 there are quarries bearing demotic inscriptions, and in Bani Hassan, there are quarries extending more than 3 miles on the edge of the hills. The pyramids of Giza were covered with stones from Torah. As for the original building, as we mentioned, its stones were cut from local quarries, which were recently found around the pyramids themselves. As for Professor Petrie's saying that the stones of the pyramid were cut from Torah, there is no truth to it. 7 As we have proven that previously. Perhaps the writers of the Greeks and Romans had an excuse for saying that the stones of the pyramids were cut from Torah, because the pyramids in their era were still covered with Torah stones, and therefore they ruled that all the pyramids were built from this stone. It seems that the stones of Torah were the finest types of limestone stones, and therefore it is not far-fetched that the kings had used them in building their temples, even after moving the capital to Thebes, near which there was not an excellent class for building a temple such as the temple of Amenhotep I, whose stones are very similar to the stones of Torah. However, limestone was not only used for construction, but was also used for other purposes, such as carving statues, due to the ease of working with it. The art of perfecting statues in this type of stone was evident during the era of the 5th and 6th dynasties in Giza and Saqqara, as well as imaginary doors, communion tables, and other funeral furniture were made from it. Sandstone. It is a compound of quartz sand resulting from the decomposition of ancient rocks and cohesive with each other with small amounts of clay, lime, and iron. It consists of hills extending from Esna on both sides of the Nile to Aswan, then from Kalbsha to Wadi Halfa. However, the Egyptians did not use sandstone as a building material until the 18th dynasty. However, Some blocks of it were found used in buildings dating back to the pre-dynastic era, and it was also used during the era of the 11th dynasty in the foundation, in paving the floor, in the pillars, in the ceiling stones, and in the pillar room in the temple of Mentuhotep in Deir el-Bahari. However, the spread of the use of this stone did not begin until the middle of the 18th dynasty, as the reality is that most of the temples of the kings from this period until the Roman era were built from this stone, and the most important of these temples are the following: Luxor Temple, Karnak and Kurna, Ramesseum, Medinet Habu, and Deir al-Madina, Dandara, Esna, Edfwa, Kamambo, and the elephants, as well as the temples in Nubia between Aswan and Wadi Halfa, in addition to the oases. Temples located in the western desert, although there are temples that were built, some of them with white limestone and some with sandstone. In particular, we mention the temple of Thutmose IV and the temple of Menfta. As for the temple of Hatshepsut in Deir el-Bahari, it was built entirely of white limestone. The most important sand quarry is located at Al-Silsila on the Nile, 40 km north of Aswan, between Edfu and Kamambo, and there are inscriptions on it from the 18th dynasty until the Roman era. 25 miles south of Aswan also, and these last quarries were used around the 30th dynasty until the Roman era, especially for cutting the stones with which the Kartas temple and the temple of the elephants were built. This is seen in the small quarries near Dabur, Taifa, and Bait al-Wali. Granite stone. The word granite refers to a large species of crystalline stones of volcanic origin, and they are not consistent in their composition, such as limestone or sandstone. In fact, they are composed of several different elements, the most important of which are quartz, feldspar, and mica. Granite has been used as a building material since the beginning of the dynastic era, and we mentioned above its use in construction, in cladding the third pyramid, in building the temple of the second pyramid of Khafra, and inside the pyramids. And the granite that was used in the oldest eras was the granular granite extracted from Aswan, and the grey granite was used as well, but infrequently. There is no dispute that the Seen granite mentioned by Pliny in relation to its cut from Seen 10, i.e. Aswan, is the red granite stone, but the word Seen is now used to denote granite rocks of a dark grey color. Granite is found in many places in the regions of the country, but it is abundant in Aswan, in the eastern desert, in the Sinai, and in small quantities in the western desert. The most important of its quarries are in Aswan, two of them, 1 kilometer south of the city, and the second is located on the eastern side of the plateau. However, there are small quarries on the islands of Elephantine and Suhail, as well as in a few other places. The quarries of Aswan and Elephantine and the quarries at the First Cataract were mentioned in ancient documents since the 6th dynasty. However, it is verified that it is located next to Elephantine. We do not know of granite quarries exploited by the ancient Egyptians, unlike the quarries of Aswan and its neighborhood, except for the red granite quarry in Wadi al-Fawakir 12, which is part of Wadi Hammamat between Cana and Al-Qusayr. We do not know the date of the beginning of work on it, but it is likely that it was opened during the Roman era. Granite was used infrequently since the pre-dynastic era for purposes other than construction, especially in making utensils 13 and dishes, and at the beginning of the dynastic era it was used a lot, due to the large use of copper tools, and it was also used to make coffins and then to carve statues, obelisks, paintings, and other things. Alabaster stone. The name alabaster is usually known as calcium sulfate gypsum, but the Egyptian alabaster is completely different from it, as it is composed of calcium carbonate. Egyptian alabaster is a stone consisting of crystallized and compressed calcium carbonate, and its color is white or yellowish white, and its thin segments are somewhat transparent with veins most of the time. The first to the era of the 19th dynasty, for example, it was used in a room in the Step 14 Pyramid of Saqqara, 3rd dynasty, and in a room in the Valley Temple of King Khafra, and in the Pyramid of Wanas in Saqqara, 5th dynasty. Likewise, during the reign of the kings of the 6th dynasty, 15, in paving the middle part of the Temple of the Tt Pyramid, and in the 12th dynasty, in the niche of the Temple of King Senusret I 16 in Karnak, etc. There is alabaster in Sinai, and in various other places in the desert on the eastern shore of the Nile, so we find quarries of it in Wadi Jerewi, west of Helwan, dating back to the Old Kingdom, 17, and in the desert between Cairo and Suez, and in Magaga, where stones were cut from it during the reign of Muhammad Ali 18, and in the region located between Minya and south of Asiut, and in this region are the most important ancient quarries for this stone, the most important of which is the Hatnub quarry located 15 miles east of Amarna, and it contains inscriptions dating back to the 3rd dynasty until the 20th dynasty 19, and there is another quarry in the south located in the Asiut valley. It was used in the early 18th dynasty, then it was used again during the reign of Muhammad Ali. It was mentioned by Greek writers since the 4th century BC. In fact, this type of stone was popular with the ancient Egyptians, because it was beautiful to look at after polishing, in addition to being soft and easy to work with. In addition to its use for construction, it was used for other purposes. Tools from it were found in the pre-dynastic era 20 to the end of the pharaonic era and beyond. Many utensils were made from it, and the heads of beautiful pins were made from it, and coffins were carved from it since the era of the 3rd and 4th dynasties, such as the sarcophagus of the Queen Hetepheres and the sarcophagus of the pharaoh Seti I. It is sometimes made of it, especially in the era of the Old Kingdom, when huge quantities of utensils were found in the pyramid of Djoser made of this stone. Basalt stone. This stone is black in color, heavy in weight, cohesive atoms, and its life often shows luster, and it is of two types. Dolorite, and the type of basalt that is used in Egypt is actually diorite with fine grains, and it was used during the era of the Old Kingdom to pave some parts of the temples, as can be seen in the patch of the Khufu pyramid, part of which is still remaining until now, and from this stone some parts of the temples of the kings of the 5th dynasty in Saqqara were also paved, such as the halls and funeral roads, and some rooms, as well as some parts of the sun temples in Abu Sur located between Giza and Saqqara. Basalt stone is found in several parts of the country, such as the Abu Zabal quarries and the quarries located in the northwest of the Giza pyramids in the Abu Rawash area, in the desert between Cairo and Suez, in Fayum, and at a close distance to the southeast of Samalot, in Aswan, and in the Baria oasis, and in the eastern desert and Sinai. It seems that the basalt that was used during the era of the Old Kingdom in the cemetery extending from Giza to Saqqara was brought from Fayum, as there is no evidence that the basalt that was used in this cemetery was brought from Abu Zabal, especially if we know that the type of basalt what was used in it is close to the type in Fayum, and Dr. Hassan Bey Sadiq stated in a letter from him in 1933 that there is no evidence that the Abu Rawash basalt quarries were used in the past, despite the fact that the type of basalt in it is of a poor, degraded type. And before basalt stone was used in construction, it was used despite its hardness in making utensils, some of which date back to the Neolithic era, the Battery era and the pre-dynastic era. In addition, he found slab heads from it from the Neolithic era, and basalt was sometimes used in making coffins, and it is possible that the sarcophagus of King Menkaure who drowned in the sea was made of this stone, but there are several coffins that he thought were made of basalt, but they are actually a light blue-gray schist. Basalt was also used in making statues, and people sometimes confuse grey granite, black granite, schist, and basalt. For this reason, things were known as basalts, and in fact they are not basalts. Quartzite stone, it is one of the types of cohesive sandstone, and it may be ordinary sandstone, coherent with interlaced silica, by mixing quartz crystallized with grains of sand, and its colors and textures differ, so it is white, yellowish, or red, and its grains are fine or coarse. It is found in Al-Jabal al-Ahmar 24 near Cairo and in the desert between Cairo and Suez, and in a cave on the road to Burhamam 25 and in the depression of Wadi al-Natrun, as well as on the tops of sandstone hills in Nubia east of the Nile 26 to the north of Aswan, and in the Sinai. It was not widely used in buildings, and most of what we know is that some doorsteps were made of it for the pyramid of King Titi in Saqqara and in the covering of the burial chamber in the pyramid of Hawara. 12th dynasty, as well as in the northern pyramid and the southern pyramid in Majgana, 12th dynasty. The quarries of Al-Jabal al-Ahmar are still in use and there were inscriptions on their rocks, but they have now disappeared. This quarry and the stones that were cut from it were mentioned several times in ancient documents. Point 28. This type of stone was used, unlike buildings, in making coffins and statues, such as the sarcophagus in the Hawara pyramid from the 12th dynasty, the sarcophagus of Thutmose III, Hatshepsut and Tutankhamun, all of which are from the 18th dynasty, and as the head of the king. Defra from the 4th dynasty, the statue of King Senusret III from the 12th dynasty, Thutmose IV, Senmut, 18th dynasty, and the statue of the god Fata, 19th dynasty. There is a suspicion that the two statues of Memnon, Amenhotep III, are made of this type of stone. The stones that the Egyptian used for non-construction purposes. There are other stones that the Egyptian used, other than what we mentioned, in making coffins and statues, and small things such as cups and utensils and tools and weapons. And the oldest thing that remains for us in Egypt until now is what was made of the stone of the thorn. In fact, the types of stones that were used in Egypt and distinguishing them from each other are among the most complex things that confront the archaeologist in his research, and we will suffice here to mention these stones and their use in the simplest way, without interfering in the technical details. Alberchia stone, it is a stone composed of pieces with sharp angles, and there are different types of it in Egypt, including the red one that tends to white, and the green type, which is a rock mixed with a mother of another material, while the red and white albrachia consists of white pieces mixed with a red mother, and it is found in abundance on the western shore. The Nile is found in several places, and it is found in the north of Minya, near Asiut, 29, and in Thebes, near Esna, as well as in the eastern desert, 30. And this stone was used in particular during the era of the First Dynasties in the manufacture of utensils, 31, and then disappeared after that until the era Roman, as it was issued at the time to Italy. As for the green perchia, it contains pieces of rock of very different descriptions, buried in a mother of a different color. The green color is the dominant one, but it is not the original breccia. Alberchia alcadra is found in several places, and the best known of them is in the valley of Hammamat Alberchia as well as at the mouth of Wadi Deb, and in the area west of Jabal Dara, Jabal Manfaul, in the Al-Urf chain, and in Jabal Hamada. 32. All of these places are located in the eastern desert, as well as in Sinai. 33. Diorite stone, or the stone of the mountain of fire, it is called a species of crystalline stone with grains, and it consists of white feldspar and black rhinestones, and its grains are fine or coarse, and it is found in Egypt in abundance in several places, especially in Aswan and in the eastern and western deserts and in the Sinai. 34. The use of diorite is due to the Neolithic era, as pieces of plates and an axe head 35 and diorite were found in it, which was used in ancient Egypt in several different types, one of which has thick grains, and its color is black and white, and it was used in the pre-dynastic era, and in the first dynasties to make pinheads and cups and pots. 36. And sometimes for making small paintings. This particular type was brought from Aswan, and a similar type was brought from the eastern desert from the hills between Cana and Al-Qusair in Wadi Samna. The latter was exploited in the Roman era, and there is another type that archaeologists called diorite, from which the famous statue of King Khafra was carved in the Egyptian Museum. This type was used during the era of the Old Kingdom, and it has white and black spots, and it differs greatly in its appearance, even in the piece 1, but most of the time it is dark gray, light gray, or white streaked with black, and the latter type was frequently used in the manufacture of pots and cups. As for the other types, they were used in making statues, especially during the 4th dynasty. Recently, the place from which this type of stone was extracted was found in the western desert at a distance of 40 miles northwest of Abu Simbel in Nubia. There is another type of porphyry diorite, which is composed of a black mother of pearl, in which large, fully formed crystals lie in the center of a black mother of pearl with bright white pieces. Diorite stone, it is a type of coarse basalt, and there are no limited differences between them. It is found in the eastern desert near Al-Qusair, 38, and near Jabal al-Dukhan and in Sinai. One of its most important uses is the manufacture of pestles that were used in the manufacture of hard stones, and large balls of it can be seen dumped in the ancient granite quarries in Aswan, and in the quartzite quarries in the Red Mountain near Cairo. These machines have remained since the time of the ancient Egyptians, conclusive evidence that they used machines suitable for the manufacture of these stones. Dolomite stone, dolomite, which is, as defined by Flinders Petrie, a solid, opaque stone, white in color, interspersed with veins that are sometimes snow-white, but most of the time they are gray, and sometimes they are black or dark gray spots, and it is found in the eastern desert in several places, and it was used in the eras of the First Dynasties to make cups and utensils, and then it was used later in other things. Petrie mentioned that he found 4439 vessels of what he calls dolomitic alabaster from the era of the First Dynasty. The stone of flint or flint, it is the first stone used in Egypt and in the rest of the nations of the world before copper was known. And the man of the Stone Age made his weapons and tools from this stone even after the discovery of copper, but in small quantities, and it continued to be used in making decorative tools that were just to follow the pure traditions, and the Ziran includes a very cohesive type of silica, which is dark gray, or black in color, and breaks it is in the form of fragments, and its edge is cutting, and it is found in abundance in different places in Egypt in the form of small knots and layers in the limestone rocks, as well as it is found scattered on the surface of the desert, after it got rid of the limestone rocks by erosion. Gypsum, it is the material that the ancient Egyptians used instead of lime to whiten the walls until the use of lime was known during the Ptolemaic era, and it is a natural material that varies greatly in color and composition. In nature, it is in the form of scattered crystalline pieces that are not suitable for drilling. It is also found in the form of coherent rocks, such as those found in the Mariout region, west of Alexandria, between Ismailia and Suez, and in Fayum, as it is found in excessive abundance near the Red Sea coast. Gypsum is similar in shape to alabaster, which is why it is sometimes called alabaster. In addition to using mortar, it was used sparingly in ancient Egypt in making utensils and dishes, as indicated by Miss Kitten Thompson during the era of the Third Dynasty. Among the contents of the tomb of Tutankhamun is made of this material, and Petrie found a plate from 41 prehistoric times made of gypsum. Gypsum is distinguished from alabaster in that it is softer and can be affected with a nail, while alabaster cannot be affected by anything less durable than steel. Obsidian, which is obsidian or lake stone, it is a glassy material in shape, black glass, and when it is broken, its pieces are irregular like glass, and it is actually natural glass of volcanic origin. Its color is usually black, but it may be dark brown, dark gray, or dark green. And when broken in the form of pieces, it is somewhat transparent, and until now it has not been found naturally in Egypt, but it is found in the countries of Arabia and Abyssinia, 42 in the valleys in the peninsula of Aden and in other places in the countries of Arabia, 43 in Armenia, and in various parts of the islands of the White Sea average. Since the pre-dynastic era, he used tools and weapons such as spearheads, then he used amulets, scarabs, small pots, and eyes for statues. Among the most important examples that we have in our hands is the head of Amenemhet III, the 12th dynasty, 44 etc. He examined the issue of the source of the obsidian, and one of the archaeologists said that it was brought to Egypt from Armenia. Porphyry rock, the word porphyry originally means purple, and it was originally called a type of rock that has this color, imperial porphyry. But the name porphyry in geology is given to any volcanic rock in which there are visible crystals scattered throughout its parts in a material of uniform color. Porphyry rocks differ greatly in terms of the nature and size of their apparent crystals, as well as in their color. They are found throughout the country near Aswan, in the eastern desert 46 and in the Sinai. Porphyry was used in the pre-dynastic era, and in the early dynasty era, to make utensils, and the color chosen for that was black and white, i.e. white crystals in a black mother. We do not have information telling us about the source from which the ancient Egyptians used to take what they needed from this stone, and all that can be indicated in this regard is that Dr. Hume says, rocks from this stone similar to those from which the Egyptians made their utensils are found in the eastern desert. And the best type of porphyry rock cut in ancient times is undoubtedly the fine-grained porphyry of purple color, which is usually called imperial porphyry, and it was extracted by the Romans and used extensively in Italy as decorative stones, and this type of stone is found in 3 places in the eastern desert, namely Jabal al-Dukhan, Jabal Ish 47 and near the Red Sea coast at Al-Urf near Wadi Deeb, and the Romans used to take what they needed from this stone from Jabal al-Dukhan. 48. We have no evidence that the Egyptians used imperial porphyry, except for a piece of a lyre-shaped cup found in Balas in Upper Egypt, and its era may date back to the Old Kingdom. This does not mean that the Egyptians used these quarries in the ages of their ancient history. Schist and slate stone. Schist is a type of rock composed in layers, and it is subject to cracking, and its name has nothing to do with its rock composition, and the special schist that was used in ancient Egypt is a rock whose grains are fine, cohesive, solid, crystallized, very similar to slate in shape, and its colors vary from light gray to gray-dark, sometimes greenish. Schist and slate are found in several habitats in the eastern desert. Schist was only extracted from Wadi Hammamat, where more than 250 inscriptions were found from the First Dynasty to the 30th Dynasty 49, and these quarries were frequently mentioned in ancient documents. Until recently, archaeologists believed that the grey schist extracted from Wadi Hammamat is the ancient Baktan stone, as mentioned on the sarcophagus of King Noktanib II, which was taken from this stone, that it is from the Baktan stone. However, scientific research has shown that the word Baktan is applied to other stones, such as the sarcophagus of King Ahmose II, which is made of fine-grained grey granite, etc. Schist was used in the pre-dynastic era, and the early dynasty era, in the manufacture of cups, utensils, and panels, and later in coffins, niches, and statues. As for slate, it is of the schist family in composition, and is usually solid. It was used in the early ages to make slate panels. Snake stone and stalactite stone. They are similar in most of the composition, but they are not of the same type. They are found together in the rocks. The snake stone is a dark rock that is not transparent. It is in the color of the snake's skin with its spots and is often dark green to the point of blackness. It is somewhat soft, but it is harder than steatite, and it can be easily cut or scratched. It is found in the eastern desert, and its most important centers are the Brahmiya and Dungash 50 regions in Wadi Shit, near Mount Derera, in the hills north of Skeet, Jebel Skeet, in the Maxim area, and in the far eastern desert where it occupies an area of about 400 miles from Ras Benares. 51. South to Ras Alba. There is a green type of snake stone in the Disi Valley located between Cana and the Red Sea, at the foot of Jabal al-Rabashi, and a black type in the Sadman Valley 52, and they are in the northwest of Al-Qusayr. Pre-dynastic Amenemhet 355 found a head of this stone. As for the statite stone, it is a kind of talc, and it is usually white or grey in color, and sometimes it is smoky black. With a glassy layer, and the bulk of the scarabs known in the world are of plated stallite, and this stone is found near Aswan 57 in Wadi al-Hamar, and in Jabal Fatara 58, which is at the latitude of Tata near the Nile, and in Wadi Golan north of Ras Benares, and it is now being exploited. Cut stones. It was natural that the stone-cutting industry did not spread except after knowledge of metals and the manufacture of machines, by which it was easy to cut hard stones. For this reason, the Egyptian did not initially use stones for buildings, but rather used mud. As for the stones that were used in the pre-dynastic era to make utensils, they were pieces of rock that were separated by nature due to the effects of weather factors, and due to water erosion, and pieces of granite in Aswan are still separated from the original rock, attesting to this. As for the method of cutting stones with the machines used by man, it can be deduced from the ancient petrification sites that still remain in the Aswan region. The cutting of soft, easy stones, such as alabaster, limestone, and sandstone, was done by separating the block to be cut from its four sides from the original rock, with wooden tines and veins soaked with water. And the tools that were used in this of metal were chisels or beaks of copper until the Middle Kingdom, when they were replaced at that time by machines of bronze, and then the two were used side by side, and pestles of wood and hammers of stone were also used. As for the cutting of hard stones, it did not begin until the Middle Ages, when the Egyptians started cutting long huge blocks to make huge obelisks and statues. Before that, they used to meet their needs from the pieces that nature had separated them from, which still remain in the Aswan region, and some of the stones needed to build the Aswan Dam were taken from them. Some architects have studied the method of petrifying granite and quartzite, and it is said that the granite was separated by hammering with diorite balls, and using hammers that were equipped with metal machines, and hammering and pins were used to cut quartzite with the use of another machine that may have been a pick. How to make stones. It is possible to deduce the method of making stones after cutting them from the quarries from the traces left by the machines on the manufactured piece, especially the statues of which a great number were found that had not yet been made, and from the illustrations that were found painted on some tombs. Petrie 61 and Reisner 62. In fact, the statues made of stone, especially those carved in hard stones such as diorite, granite, quartzite, and schist, were admired by all due to the accuracy of their manufacture. Some of them imagined that steel metal was used in their manufacture, and it was even more amazing that some of them thought that the copper or bronze machines that were used in their manufacture were installed in them pieces of diamonds or other hard stones to manufacture them, but it was proven that the matter is easier than all that. Professor Reisner 63 summarized for us the important processes that were taken to highlight the statue or other pieces of art until its final stage. First, striking the stone, and it is possible that this was found represented in the tomb of T in Saqqara. Second, scrubbing with a stone in the hand with crumbled powder. It was thought that the crumbling powder might be present, but a speaking image was found proving the existence of this powder, which is the sand in the university excavations in the pyramids area in the tomb of the king's son-in-law and the director of his palace 64 Bem Nofret, as we see in the scenes of crafts and industries two makers polishing a sarcophagus, and in the hands of one of them a stone rubbed the cover of the coffin, and over the picture he wrote the following, polishing the coffin, then he wrote after that, pour water and put sand. After that, we see the maker rubbing the surface of the coffin lid with these two materials, water and sand. And if we know that the sand contains 15% of the abrasive material, it is easy for us to understand the inscriptions. There is another scene of this kind that was found in the excavations of Saqqara on the way to the pyramid of King Wanas. Third, publishing with a copper weapon with crumbled powder, and no pictures of that were found. Fourth, piercing with a tubular-shaped auger, with crumbled powder, and this auger is a hollow tube of copper that is used to run it between the hands or a bowstring, or a movable fist, and there are other types of drills run with special methods that were found in Saqqara from the 5th dynasty, and from the 12th dynasty in Deir al-Jabra'i. 65 The perforator was used to hollow out pots made of stone, especially cylindrical pots that were made of hard stones such as basalt and diorite. Fifth, piercing with copper, or a pointed stone with crumbled powder. 3 tombs from the 18th dynasty were seen in Thebes. 66 drills run by strings to pierce beads, and in a 4th tomb for piercing something unknown. 6th, scrubbing with a copper instrument containing crumbled powder, but this is doubtful. However, those who believe in using steel machines for these purposes can argue against them that steel, no matter how hard it is to increase its strength, cannot be used to cut hard stones such as diorite, granite, and schist. This is in addition to the fact that it is not possible to use such machines with crumbled powder, such as sandpaper, and this opinion is unquestionable. In addition, the plinths made of copper were used only in soft stones. As for the use of saws and drills, including those in tubular shape, there are clear evidences on work stones indicating that they were used for this purpose. For example, we find signs of saws in the patch of the Khufu temple 67 made of basalt, and on his sarcophagus made of pink granite, as well as on the sarcophagus of Khafra. As for the traces of the tubular perforation, we see them on 2 statues of King Menkaure, one of which is made of alabaster in full relief, and the second has not yet been sculpted. We also see the trace of the saw in the famous statue of King Khafra made of diorite. 2. Precious and semi-precious stones. The ancient Egyptians, like other nations of the world, were fond of adornment, and therefore they were searching behind the fields for the tools with which they adorned themselves since prehistoric times, and we found in their tombs various types of precious and semi-precious stones that no nation in the world had preceded them to, according to our information so far. Some of these stones are still considered precious in our view, while others are considered nothing but ordinary stones that have no material value, and the Egyptian used them to make amulets, beads, jewelry, and scarabs, as well as to inlay his chests, coffins, and furniture with what feels good. Taste and elegance. The most important of these stones are the following: agate, amethyst, emerald, Egyptian beryl, carnelian, chalcedony or chalcedony coral, hematite, garnet, bloodstone, hematite, jade, sard, lapis lazuli, malachite, peridot, olivine, onyx, pearl, rock crystal, sardonyx, turquoise. It is noted that the Egyptian did not know diamonds, opals, or red or blue sapphires. The stones that we mentioned in the ancient Egyptian documents mentioned that they were used for special purposes for jewelry and adornment, or that they were brought to the country as tribute, or that they were taken as part of the spoils of war. Although these stones were named by their names in the Egyptian inscriptions separately, the translation of some of them is still questionable, and Pliny mentioned to us about 30 names of precious stones that were received from Egypt and Abyssinia, but he achieved only a few of which. And we will talk about each of these stones and what they are in Egyptian jewelry and in industry, as far as our information has reached. Agate, onyx, and sardonyx, all of which are species of chalcedony streaked or veined. And all these stones are attributed to each other, and they are often called just agate, and they all contain silica, and there is no difference between them other than the color of the veins or the graining. In the stump of the agate, we find that the veins are straight, almost regular, and the color of the stump is milky, alternating with black, and in the stump of the agate, the white is alternating with the reddish-brown. Agate is found in abundance in Egypt, especially in the form of pebbles, and it was also found in small quantities mixed with jasper, and chalcedony in the Abu Jarida Valley in the eastern desert. 69. It is possible that sardonyx and sardonyx are found naturally in Egypt, but they were not mentioned in the reports of the geology department. Agate stones and beads were found in pre-dynastic tombs, 70, and beads of onyx were also found in this era. The oldest known date for the use of agate is the era of the 22nd dynasty, and it is permissible from the 19th dynasty. He recently found agate vessels that probably date back to the Roman era in Keft, 6 of which are in the Egyptian Museum, and 2 great vessels that were recently purchased. Amethyst stone. Amethyst, it is composed of transparent quartz colored with traces of magnesium compound. And it was used in the past in particular to make necklaces, as well as for bracelets, and sometimes scarabs are made from it, and its use dates back to the pre-dynastic era 71, and it has been found since the era of the 12th dynasty and during the era of the New Kingdom. For example, 2 scarabs of this stone were found in the tomb of Tutankhamun. And it was extracted in the past from Mount Abu Diaba and the Sayfaga region 72 in the eastern desert, and mines were also found in the southeast of Aswan, 73, and others from the era of the Old Kingdom at a distance of 40 kilometers northwest of Abu Simbel. Egyptian emerald. This precious stone is green, pale blue, yellow, or white, but we only know of it green, which was used in ancient Egypt. Roman Greco. It is possible that beautiful types of this stone were found in the past and cannot be found now. Emeralds are always transparent and never dark, and the Egyptian always used them in their natural hexagonal cuts, because they were harder than quartz, so it was difficult for him to cut them in an organized manner. It seems that Egyptian emeralds were never used in ancient Egypt before the era of the Ptolemaids, and therefore the precious stones that were found in Dashur 75 jewelry and were said to be emeralds when examined for the first time were actually green feldspars, as well as all the stones that were called emeralds or emeralds. Aquamarine before the era of the Ptolemaids, as it is not one of them, but rather from other stones, after the chemical scientist Lucas examined it technically. Bloodstone and red agate. Carnelian and sarled bloodstone is chalcedonian red, slightly transparent, and its redness is due to the presence of a small amount of iron oxide in it, and it is found in abundance in the form of stones in the eastern desert, and it has been used a lot since the pre-dynastic era. First, to make beads and charms, and second, to inlay furniture, jewelry, and coffins. It was imitated during the era of the New Kingdom, as can be seen in 2 sarcophagi of Uya furniture, and in the sarcophagus of Smenkhkare, as well as in many of the things that were found in the tomb of Tutankhamun. As for the narrative stone, it is a kind of dark bloodstone, and some of its types are close in color to black, and it was used little since the pre-dynastic era 77 and beyond, and Pliny says, 78 that the narrative was found in Egypt. Chalcedony or chalcedony, it is a kind of transparent silica, somewhat waxy in color, and when it is found pure, it is white, or grayish-white with some bluishness. However, this stone may be in many colors, and each color has a special name. It is found in Egypt in Wadi Saga, 79 and in Wadi Abu Harida in the eastern desert, and in the Bahariya oasis in the western desert. And also at a distance of 40 miles northwest of Abu Simbel, and in Fayum. It was sometimes used in ancient Egypt to make beads, scarabs, and pendants, and its use dates back to the pre-dynastic era. Coral, it is solid structures of sea creatures and its color is white or red in various colors, or black, and the famous one is white and red, and white coral was not found in Egyptian antiquities except once in a burial, 81 and dates back to the 7th century BC. Petrie found a large amount of it in the form of natural branches. And the precious coral is extracted from the western side of the Mediterranean Sea, and all that was found in Egypt of coral dates back to the Ptolemaic era and beyond. As for the tubular coral, it was found since the Battery era, 82 and the pre-dynastic era. Likewise, this type was found in the tombs of Nubia, whose era dates back to the era of the Old Kingdom. 83. Amazon stone or green feldspar. It is an opaque, pale green stone, and it is not consistent in color. It was found in small quantities in Mount Majaf in the eastern desert 84 and it was used to make beads since the Neolithic era 85 and it was used a lot during the era of the 12th dynasty. As seen in jewelry Dashur and Al-Lahun. It was thought that it is the emerald in these jewelry, and this stone is often mixed with other types of green stones, so that it is sometimes called the mother of emeralds. Ceylon stone, the type that was used in Egypt is dark red or reddish-brown, slightly transparent. It is found in abundance in the Aswan region in the eastern desert, and in Sinai. Its stones are very small for use, especially those found in Aswan. As for the large one, it was found in western Sinai, and the Silane stone was used to make beads since the pre-dynastic era. Hematite stone, bloodstone, which is iron oxide, and it is found in nature in different colors, so it is black, red, and brown, or with thin plates that are shiny layers on top of each other, and the special type that is used in Egypt from hematite to make beads, amulets, anklets, and tools. The small adornment is the deep black with a metallic sheen. It has been used since the pre-dynastic era. 86 Although hematite is found in abundance in Egypt in the eastern desert to extract iron from it, 87 we do not know where the amount that was used in making these things was brought from. Jade or jade stone, this name is given to 2 distinct types of mineral, one of which is called nephrite, or real jade. The second is similar to jade, and in its appearance it is like real jade, and it cannot be distinguished from it except by chemical analysis, and both are white, grey, or green in various colors, and it is transparent and waxy. It was found on the heads of 2 axes dating back to the pre-dynastic era, 88 of which are in the Egyptian Museum, and the other in the London Museum. Tutankhamun's ring made of this stone. Jasper, it is a type of dense, impure silica, and its color is red, green, brown, or black. The red color was used in ancient Egypt to make beads and amulets, and sometimes to inlay jewelry and make scarabs. 2 pieces of red jasper were found, dating back to the First Dynasty. 90 As for brown and black jasper, things made from them were found from the Middle Kingdom. 91 Scarabs were also found from that era. As for green jasper, objects dating back to the 4th dynasty were found in it. Red jasper is found in some rocks, in the form of veins, in the eastern desert. An example of this is the hills of Al-Hadrabiyah, 93 and near the Saga Valley, and in the Abu Harida Valley. As for the green jasper spotted with red, it was found on the road to Cana and Al-Qusayr. Lapis lazuli, it is a dark stone with a dark blue color, sometimes interspersed with white spots or veins, and sometimes it has minute yellow dots, which appear as atoms of gold, and it seems that this stone was not found in Egypt. However, Al-Idrisi mentioned that there is a mine in the Karga oasis. The most important source for it is the country of Afghanistan in the town of Badakhshan 95, and it seems that this is the original source of this mineral. Lapis lazuli was used in Egypt since the pre-dynastic era, 96 onwards, to make beads, amulets, scarabs, and other small things, as well as to inlay jewelry, especially during the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom, and this stone was mentioned in Egyptian inscriptions from the 12th dynasty onwards. In several different directions. Danjay stone, mulberry malachite, which is the base copper and its beautiful green color, and we did not find it in Egyptian tombs, except in the form of a powder that is used as an eyelid with it, and it was found from the Badri era and the pre-dynastic era until the 19th dynasty, 98, and it was sometimes used to make beads since the pre-dynastic era, and during the era of the First Dynasty, 99 spells and scarabs were taken from it from the era of the 19th dynasty. Some scholars missed the distinction between this stone and the aquamarine stone, the green emerald stone, and the green feldspar stone, as happened in the necklace extracted from Dashur in the 12th dynasty, and the two bracelets that were found in this era as well, and it became clear that the two bracelets, one of them from green feldspar, and the second from turquoise, and dahlias are found in the Sinai and in the eastern desert 100. Its mines were used in ancient times to extract berries. First, and secondly to extract copper. Copper was extracted from Wadi Maghara and Sarabat al-Khadim, and from these two places turquoise was extracted in the past. Hence the difficulty in distinguishing between Danaj and turquoise, especially since they were extracted from one place, and they were not distinguished from each other in color. Hence the error also came in that some scholars translated the word screwdrivers, which is the name of turquoise in the ancient Egyptian language, with the word danjay. Pearl is extracted from the shores of the Red Sea, as well as the Persian Gulf, and at a distance from the coasts of Ceylon, and other places. Although shells have been used in Egypt since prehistoric times, pearls were not used until the Ptolemaic era, except for the buttons of the necklace of Queen Ahotep, the mother of King Ahmose I, 101, which are not real pearls. Quartz stone and rock crystal. Quartz is a type of crystalline silica, and it has no color when it is pure, and it may be slightly transparent or dark, and the first type is called rock crystal, and the second is milky quartz. Sometimes the color of quartz is brown to black, and in this case it is called smoky quartz, and this type is found in an old gold mine in Romit in the eastern desert. 103. It was used in a small amount in the pre-dynastic era, 104 and after, as beads and other things were made from it, such as small vessels, and eye horns that were made for statues, as well as were placed in the eyes of coffins, which were in the form of a human being, and all kinds of quartz harder than glass is also more resistant than steel, so it cannot be affected by this metal. Turquoise or turquoise, its color is sky blue, some of it is greenish blue, and some of it is green, and it is found in the form of veins in al-Sukr. The turquoise mines are Wadi Maghara and Sarabat al-Khadim in the Sinai Peninsula 105, and it is found in the form of layers in sandstone rocks. It was used in Egypt since the Badri era, 106 and prehistoric times, and it was used in crafting bracelets since the First Dynasty, as well as for pilgrims in the 4th dynasty, as stones from it were found in the tomb of Queen Hetepheres from the era of the 4th dynasty in Giza, 107. He thought some say it is oily. It was found in abundance during the era of the 12th dynasty in Dashur jewelry. Some have thought that it is an artificial turquoise, due to the beauty of its color. I also found some pieces of it in the tomb of Tutankhamun, including a scarab of a beautiful blue color, and blue-green pieces studded in 2 waistcoats. 3. Minerals. The exposed antiquities in Egypt indicate that the inhabitants of the Nile Valley used, since ancient times, minerals of various types, some of which were found naturally in the soil of the country, and some of which were brought to it from foreign countries with which it had ties of trade or colonialism, and the most important of these minerals are copper, gold, and iron, tin, silver, and lead. Added to this is the use of bronze, which is actually a mixture of copper and tin, and electrum, which is a mixture of gold and silver. In very late times, brass was used, which is a mixture of red copper and zinc. There are other raw materials used by the Egyptians, and we will talk about each as follows. Copper. This mineral is not usually found in nature in a metallic form, but rather it is extracted from different ores, and it is one of the oldest minerals known to man, and it was used in Egypt before gold. Its presence in Egypt dates back to the Battery era, then the pre-dynastic era. The oldest copper tools found are beads, drills, and pins from the Battery era. 108 Their use continued until the pre-dynastic era, in which bracelets, small shovels, rings, hook heads, needles, tweezers, and other small machines were also found. At the end of the pre-dynastic era, copper weapons became available to the Egyptians to defend themselves with, and the First Dynasty era did not come until the Egyptians used huge tiles, pliers, shovels, knives, daggers, spears, ornaments, and household tools such as the basin and the jug, and all of these were of copper in large quantities. It was abundant, and copper was never found naturally in the land of Egypt. Rather, it was extracted from ores, the most important of which was aloe vera, which was used since ancient times to eyeliner, and therefore it was easy to detect this metal easily after smelting this substance. Copper ores are found within the borders of the Egyptian country in the Sinai Peninsula, and in the Eastern Desert. In the Sinai Peninsula, mines were found that are believed to have been for the extraction of copper, or for the extraction of turquoise in Wadi Meghera and in Sarabat al-Khadim. They lie in the southwest of the peninsula, and are about 12 miles between them. Circumstances indicate that copper ore was mined in the past, in Wadi Meghera. As I found the remains of astrology colonies dating back in particular to the Old Kingdom, as well as the Middle Kingdom. Large quantities of deposits and smelting residues were found from the remains of the Old Kingdom, as well as pieces of copper ore, several smelting pots, and part of a copper casting mold. As for the era of the Middle Kingdom, quantities of copper deposits, smelted pieces, and pieces of smelting vessels were found, as well as a part of smelting vessels that still contained raw powder. This led to the existence of a mold for weapon blades. As for Sarabat al-Khadim, there are fewer traces of mining, because this place has not been investigated yet. The most important ore that was mined in Sarabat al-Khadim, and in Meghera, was green azurite, along with a little blue azurite. Expeditions were sent to search for this mineral and others in Wadi Meghera, and in the valley and mines near Sarabat al-Khadim since the First Dynasty. 45 documents were found in Wadi Meghera, including 36 rock inscriptions, 8 graffiti, and a plate. The oldest of them dates back to the First Dynasty until the 19th Dynasty. As for the valley and the mines near Sarabat al-Khadim, there were 15 documents, most of them from the 12th Dynasty and some from the New Kingdom. As for the temple erected in and around this spot, 288 inscriptions, 110 were found, most of which are on blocks of stone, small statues, and paintings, and among these inscriptions is one with the name of King Sneferu, but it appears from its inscriptions that it was written in an era after the era of this king. Most of these inscriptions date back to the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom. It is noted that the mining of turquoise was mentioned a lot in these documents, and the mining of copper was mentioned only once, and in most cases we find that the first expeditions that were sent to these regions did not leave their heads in their inscriptions except for the name and titles of the king, and after that the names of the heads of the campaign and its officers were added. This started since the era of the 5th Dynasty. And then we find that the purpose of the mission was engraved on the rocks. Therefore, it is difficult for us at first to know the purposes for which the campaign was sent from the inscriptions themselves. Were they to extract turquoise, to extract copper, or to discipline the disobedient only. However, copper mining was not limited to Wadi Meghera and Sarabat al-Khadim, but also extended to the neighboring areas of the latter, such as Jabal Rana, Wadi Melha, and Wadi Kark. Likewise, in the southeast of the peninsula there were copper mines, as ores and deposits of it were found in several places, the most important of which were near the Sanad Plain, and in the hills west of the Nabksharm Plain, and in Wadi Ramathai, one of the tributaries of Wadi Nasab. Copper ores are found in several places in the eastern desert, the most important of which are Wadi Araba, Mount Atwa, Mount Dara, the Dungash gold mines, the hills south of Wadi Jemal, Absail, and others. The amount of copper that is extracted from the ores varies according to the places where they are mined. For example, in the places in the southwest of the Sinai Peninsula, it was found that it is extracted from the ore from 5 to 18%, while in the eastern desert, it was found that the amount of what is extracted from the ore is between 36 and 49. In Abu Sail, it was found that the percentage was 3%, and in other places it was found that the percentage increased to 20%. It must be that the copper that was extracted in Egypt from its mines until the 18th dynasty, when this metal began to be brought to it from abroad, was sufficient to meet its needs, because the remains that were found in the copper mines and the extent of their areas feel that the quantities that were extracted are great, and if we take the deposits of the mines of Wadi lineage as a measure of what is extracted from copper, the least amount of this metal extracted by the miners of Sinai until the date of the deposits of this mound, i.e. the 12th dynasty, is not less than 5,500 tons, but more, in addition to what was extracted from a cave and others. And the oldest document we have that refers to bringing copper from abroad dates back to the 18th and then the 19th dynasties. In Asia, and from the land of the god, a name used to denote various places that include regions in Western Asia, the eastern desert of Egypt, the country of Bint, and from Isi, and perhaps he meant Cyprus. The copper ores in Egypt are azurite, shares ocola, dandelion, and sulfur. As for azurite, it is a beautiful dark blue ore, of a copper base, and is found in copper deposits. It is abundant in the Sinai and the eastern desert, and is always on the surface of the earth or near the surface, and therefore it is easy to extract. It is not found as abundant as the dandelion that is usually found with it. The ancient Egyptians used it to extract copper and dyes, and then the Egyptian dispensed with it when he invented an industrial blue dye. Chrysocolla. Or borax or goldsmith's salt, it is blue or blue-green ore, and it chemically contains silicates, and it is found in Sinai and in the eastern desert, and it was used as a substance for coal, and only a small statue of a child was found from it dating back to the pre-dynastic period. Dyeing. It is a green base of copper carbonate, and it is the first ore from which copper was extracted, and it is found on the surface of the earth in the Sinai and in the eastern desert. The history of its use dates back to the Battery era, since from that era coal material was taken from it 115 until the 19th dynasty, and it was also used to color walls 116, faience and glass. In addition, beads, amulets, and other small things were sometimes made from it, but in fact the most important use of it in Egypt was the extraction of copper, as it contained a large amount of it. Bronzing, alum. Bronze is known to the Egyptians as a mixture of copper and tin, but later it also contained an amount of lead. However, this mixture was not called bronze in our time unless it contained nucrates 9% or 10% of tin. As for ancient bronze, the percentage in it was variable, as the tin in it ranged from 2 to 16%, but if the percentage of tin was less than that, it is not called the word bronze, but this amount is present in the mineral naturally. Bronze is distinguished over copper in that if 4% of tin is added to the latter, its hardness and resistance increase, especially when hammered, provided that raising this percentage to 5% makes copper easy to break when hammered. Runny and thus easy to form in the mold. In fact, this is the most important benefit in converting copper into bronze, as the reality is that copper is a poor cast metal, because it shrinks when cooled, and also because it absorbs gases, and thus becomes porous, but the presence of tin prevents the absorption of oxygen and other gases. The history of bronze is obscure in Egypt, as it was not revealed in Egypt, because in addition to not knowing the ores of tin in ancient Egypt, it was used in Asia long before it was known in Egypt, as it was known to be used in lore since 3500 BC. Therefore, the Egyptians must have known him through Asia. The era of the transition from the use of copper to the use of bronze is still unknown until now, and in fact the use of bronze did not spread in Egypt except since the 12th dynasty, but there are things dating back to the era of the Old Kingdom made of bronze, as a piece of the king's era was found. Snefru 117, that is, from the beginning of the 4th dynasty, and Sir Robert Mond 118 found Moses, who is said to be from the era of the 4th dynasty. It was found that the amount of tin in it is about 8.5%. In fact, since the era of the Middle Kingdom 119, pieces of its history have been found fixed, and therefore this era can be called the era of the beginning of the use of bronze. From the 18th dynasty onwards, small statues were made of this metal, but its use did not interfere with the use of copper, but rather they were used side by side. Bronze industry. Bronze was like copper formed by forging, or by casting in molds, and we can know the advantage of this metal if we know that the amount of its hardness after forging increases greatly. For example, it was found that a piece of bronze has an amount of tin of 10.34%. And it became after the methods 275, and bronze was used in the late ages in Egypt to make small statues, which were casting deaf or hollow, and small statues were usually cast deaf, while large statues were casting hollow. The casting method is known as the lost wax method. This is to make a model of beeswax of the shape that is intended to be cast, and then cover this shape with a material that takes the shape of the mold. It is possible that this material was made of clay, or of clay mixed with other materials. Then the whole is buried in sand, or in the ground that acts as a mold. Then the whole thing is heated to the point where the wax melts or burns, and it is taken out of the holes that were specially made to pour the molten metal from the bronze into. After that, the mold becomes solid and rigid, ready for use, and molten metal from bronze is poured into it, then it is left to cool. After that, the mold is crumbled, and the required shape is revealed, so the final repairs are made in it with a special machine. Scenes representing bronze casting were painted in the tombs of the 18th dynasty, 120. There are casting molds in the Egyptian Museum, especially for casting forms of birds, and we do not know if they are for casting gold or bronze, or they are molds for the work of faience and glass. Brass, a mixture of copper and zinc, was found in the 1st century AD. Rings from it and earrings were found in the tombs of Nubia 121 of the late era. Gold. Gold is found in nature in abundance in the form of a metal, and it has never been found in a pure state. Rather, it always contains quantities of silver or copper, and sometimes we find traces of iron and other minerals. Gold is usually found in nature in two forms, either in irregular veins, in the folds of quartz rocks, or in alluvial sands and pebbles. This is the result of the fragmentation of rocks containing gold, which were carried by a stream of water that dried up later. Gold was found in these two cases. And since it was easy to recognize gold in its bright yellow color, as well as the ease of its extraction, the Egyptians knew and used it since ancient times, dating back to pre-dynastic times. And gold is found in vast areas in Egypt between the Nile Valley and the Red Sea, especially in the eastern desert in the south from the road to Cana and Al-Qusayr to the borders of Sudan. In addition, gold mines have been found north of the latitude of Cana up to Dongola in Sudan, and most of these areas are located in Nubia, which is the ancient Ethiopia mentioned by ancient writers, and the current Egyptian part of it is Lower Nubia, i.e. from Aswan 122 to Wadi Halfa. As for the Sudanese section, it is the country of Upper Nubia, that is, from Halfa to Merv. No gold has yet been found in the Sinai Peninsula. It was found that the number of mines that were previously occupied in quartz to extract gold is about 100, and in fact the Egyptians were among the most skilled researchers for this mineral, as there was no place where the presence of gold was felt, except that we found the Egyptians had preceded it, and killed it by examining and excavating it. The gold mining industry was revived a short time ago, but it was neglected again for economic reasons. Professor Petrie 123 thought that gold was brought to Egypt since the first family, and attributed this to its presence mixed with silver. However, he forgot that Egyptian gold sometimes contained a large amount of silver naturally, and Professor Petrie also mentioned that gold contains an amount of antimony since the era of the Second Dynasty, and thus he concluded that it must have been brought to Egypt from Transylvania, the home of antimony. 124 But that is pure mistake. In fact, ancient Egyptian documents tell us that gold was brought to Egypt from the southern regions during the 12th dynasty. While we do not have documents indicating that he was brought to Egypt from the north before the 19th dynasty. This mineral was brought to Egypt in the 12th dynasty from Keft, Nubia, and during the 18th dynasty from the upper lands, Karoi, Keft, Kush, Bint, and the southern regions. And in the 19th dynasty of Akhita, the land of the god, Karoi and Bent, and in the 20th dynasty of Edfu, Imo, Keft, the country of Deng, the lands of slaves, and the Amio, and from the north during the era of the 19th dynasty from Lobia, and in the 20th dynasty of Asia, and in the 22nd family of Kantnefer 125. The oldest map in the world is now in the Turin Museum, drawn on papyrus. It shows the sites of gold mines in the eastern desert, dating back to the era of King Seti I of the 19th dynasty. There is no dispute that the Egyptian, since the Old Kingdom, had at his disposal a large amount of gold, as evidenced by the remains of Queen Hetepheres, especially her golden dome, as well as what was found in some tombs of the great people, and the amount of gold increased during the era of the New Kingdom, as seen in the tomb of Tutankhamun, as we find that the weight of his sarcophagus is only approximately 110.5 kilograms of pure gold. Gold was formulated by methods and alloys. Likewise, its plates were embossed with embossing and intaglio, and its thin plates were decorated with furniture, wooden coffins, and other adornments, and copper was also used. This indicates that he used to make fine wires for contract systems out of gold. It was noted that gold was hammered into thin sheets, and used for gilding, as well as gold coloring and welding. In short, most of the modern industries for goldsmithing were used by the ancient Egyptians. Both Williams and Vernier 126 explained the details of the methods of making jewelry, as well as the chemist Lucas measured sheets of gold vary in thickness from 0.17 to 0.54 of a millimeter, 0.09 of a millimeter. Petrie stated that the sheet thickness was often 1/5000 of an inch or 0.127 of a millimeter. And when it was intended to use gold leaf to decorate the prominent figure in the wood, the plates were placed directly on the worked wood and then fixed to it with small nails of gold. Installed may have been glue. And when it was intended to use thinner paper than the above, a layer of plaster was also placed, but the exact type of fixing material that was placed on top of it was not yet known, and Professor Laurie 127 said that he noticed in one of those cases that the material was the white of an egg. Both copper and silver metals were sometimes coated with a crust of gold, and this crust was placed on the copper in one of two ways, the first by applying a thin sheet of gold on the copper, and the second was fixing the gold leaf on the copper with an adhesive substance that might have been glue. Examples of the first type were found. They are buttons that were used as seals from approximately the 6th dynasty, and a talisman representing the god Thoth was also found. As for silver gilding, examples of it were found during the 22nd dynasty. 128. It was noted in the antiquities that were found of ancient gold that they are in various colors, so we find among them bright yellow, dark yellow, and red of different colors such as milky red, light brick, bloody, dark purple, then pink red. All of these colors are accidental, except for the last, as it resulted from mixing pure gold with a small amount of iron. As some chemists say. As for the bright yellow gold, it is pure freshness, while the dark yellow speckled contains proportions of other metals such as silver and copper. As for gray gold, it contains a large percentage of silver that changes the color of its outer surface. It is a mixture of gold and silver, and it may be natural or industrially and the type that was used in ancient Egypt is likely to have always been made by nature. The alloy of this metal may contain any percentage of gold and silver, but when the percentage of gold is high, its color is the color of natural gold. When the percentage of silver is high, the color of the metal is silvery white. In this case, the metal can be considered to be silver, and in both cases it cannot be called electrum because this name was put to denote the pale yellow metal, which the Greeks called electron, and the Romans called it electrum. It is said that it was named by this name due to its similarity to the color of amber. It is the name given to him by both Homer and Hesiod, electron. And it was mentioned in ancient documents that electrum was brought to Egypt from the country of Bint, 129 and AMU, and the highlands, and the southern kingdoms, and from the mines located east of Raetia, and from the mountains, all of which are places located in the south of Egypt, and there is no evidence that it was brought from north, or from Pectolus as Professor Petrie mentioned. In fact, there is no real separation between gold and electrum, but rather it is purely idiomatic. When the alloy contains less than 2% of silver, it is called the word gold, and when the percentage is 20 or more, its color is yellow, and thus the metal is called the word electrum, and this definition he agrees with what Pliny said. There is no dispute that electrum was naturally present in Egypt and that the amounts extracted from it were sufficient to meet the country's need. The Egyptian preferred to make his jewelry from it more than gold, due to its hardness, and perhaps that was the reason that made it so much used in ancient Egypt. It was used for the same purposes in which gold was used, that is, in making jewelry, gilding wood, wooden coffins, and furniture, and the beginning of its use goes back to the first families. Iron. There is no dispute that iron compounds are found in great abundance in nature, while pure iron metal is only found in small quantities. Iron is of two different types, the first of which is found in the form of certain crystals of iron oxide in some volcanic rocks, and it is rarely found in the form of large pieces. The second type is what is called heavenly iron, which is dust or pieces of meteors that contain iron. This latter type is characterized by the fact that it contains an amount of nickel ranging between 26.5%, while terrestrial iron, that is, what is found in volcanic rocks, does not contain this metal. Except in superbasal rocks rarely and in a very small amount. And minerals that contain iron are many in Egypt, the most important of which is hematite ore, and we have talked about it previously, and there are also some iron compounds in red and yellow ochre, and they are used for coloring, and these ores are found especially in the eastern desert and in Sinai 130 and in ochre near Aswan, and in western Sahara oases. In fact, there is no subject in which there is much discussion and conflict more than determining the era in which the use of iron began in general, and some scholars claim that iron was definitely used in Egypt since ancient times for cutting and digging hard stones, as no other means was known until now that was used to reach pieces these stones and their manufacture, unless iron or steel was used for this purpose, and those who tend to this opinion rely on the presence of some pieces of iron dating back to pre-dynastic times, and that the absence of large quantities of this metal to this day in the exposed antiquities is due to the fact that iron it is covered with rust, corroded, and its features disappear. A piece of iron was found near the Great Pyramid, and it seems that it is not old, but was left by those who were working in breaking the stones of this pyramid recently for use in their buildings. The most important pieces that were found since the pre-dynastic era are a few beads 131, but when they were analyzed, they were found to be of heavenly iron, that is, from the remnants of falling meteors. Likewise, Mesopro found several pieces 132 of a hatchet in Abu Zur, which he stated may be from the era of the 6th dynasty. But he was not certain of anything conclusive in determining its date. After that, Petrie found a quantity of rusty iron, along with shovels of copper, dating back to the 6th dynasty 133, in the foundation of a temple in Al-Araba al-Madfuna. It is possible that the iron that was found here was not in the form of a tool for use, because how to melt iron was not yet known. This is followed by the finding of an iron spearhead in Nubia, said to be from the 12th dynasty. 134 However, this date is not certain. Also, a part of a pickaxe and part of an axe were found, which are said to be from the 17th dynasty, but that has not been confirmed yet. In the tomb of Tutankhamun 135, that is, in the late 18th dynasty, a number of pieces of iron were found, which is a dagger, a pillow model, and an eye talisman set in a bracelet of gold, and 16 machines with wooden handles, and their weapons are very small and thin, all of iron, and the weight all these weapons do not exceed 4 grams, and these were without dispute using magic machines to open the mouth of the mummy of Tutankhamun, but we do not know if these were made of iron, meteors or iron of the earth. Since the era of Tutankhamun, the number of pieces of iron increased until the 25th dynasty, 136. In this era, a number of machines made of this metal were found, and then iron became widely used, as it was observed in the ruins of the town of Naucratis and the town of Daphne during the era of the 6th dynasty. The 20 that iron was used like copper, but more, and it was smelted in the country, and in the middle of the 3rd century BC, iron machines were found in the quarries. From all of the above, it is clear that a very small amount of iron left over from meteors was found in Egypt, from which beads were made, but he did not know iron in its true sense, or how to extract it from its ores. But there is no doubt that the word sky metal was present among the ancient Egyptians. On the contrary, all the pieces of iron that were found have a questionable history until the end of the 18th dynasty, when real pieces of iron were found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, and there is no dispute that they had been gifted to him by the kings of West Asia, the home of the iron industry. The iron itself must have been a new discovery in Syria and Palestine during the early 18th dynasty, as we did not find the name of iron among the gifts that were offered by the kings of these regions. The oldest date we found for the iron industry in Egypt dates back to the 6th century BC, when Petrie discovered an iron smelting plant in Naucratis 137 located in the northwest of the delta. However, we do not know where he got his raw materials from. On the other hand, we know that iron ores were extracted in the past from the eastern desert near Aswan, and it is possible that the first place was used during the era of the Romans, and the most important reason for man's acquaintance with copper before iron, despite the abundance of iron ores from copper ores, is that the latter can be cold forged as for iron, it cannot be hammered unless it is heated to a great degree. Lead. This mineral has been found in Egypt since the pre-dynastic era, and the reason for that is due to the fact that the ores of this mineral are found in Egypt, including algalina, lead metal, and appear in a metallic form that attracts attention. This is because this mineral can be obtained easily from its ores. The most important place where lead ores are found is Jabal al-Razas 138 located 70 miles south of Al-Qusayr. However, there are deposits of it in other places such as Ranga on the Red Sea coast, and the Sayfaga region near the Red Sea, as well as near Aswan. 139 The most important raw material for lead is gelina, which was used in ancient Egypt to eyeliner from the pre-dynastic era until the Coptic era. Sometimes it was used to make utensils and so on. There is no dispute that most of the lead that was used in Egypt until the era of the 18th dynasty was extracted from Egypt, and there is no evidence that it was brought from Syria until the era of the Egyptian conquests in Asia, as the documents indicate that it was brought from Zahi, and Retno, and Isi 141, and it appears that the latter is not Cyprus, but rather a region located in the north of the coast of Syria, because lead ores do not exist in Cyprus. Silver was rare in Egypt since ancient times, and all that was found is some models dating back to the era of the city of Naqada from the prehistoric era. He revealed the lid of a small vessel and a small spoon with a braided handle. 142. Traces of silver were also found in the tomb of King Semerkathe. In the tomb of King Hetepheres 143, we find that tools made of silver were very rare compared to tools that were made of gold, and therefore they were considered more precious and more valuable, as we see that gold was used generously to gild furniture, to make small dishes, drinking glasses, knives, and razors. However, only 25 stones were made of silver, studded with turquoise, lapis lazuli, and carnelian. And you see on the surface as if they are deaf pieces, but in reality they are hollow. In addition, even in the tomb of Tutankhamun, that is, after the era of head affairs by about 1,500 years, we find that silver was not used in his furniture except in a small amount. From that, we see that silver was a rare material until the era of the 18th dynasty, but it appears after this is because it was used to some extent, especially since the recent discoveries from the era of the 22nd dynasty proved that some pharaohs were making their coffins from this metal. But it was widely used during the era of the Bat Alis. No silver metal has been found in Egypt yet, neither in its natural state nor in its metallic state. Natural silver is almost pure, and it is found in small quantities in a crystalline state like needles and threads, and it is also found rarely in the form of nuggets and thin plates, and silver is found in every type of gold and sometimes in great quantity. The most important ores of silver are silver sulfate, and it is found alone or mixed with antimony sulfate or arsenic and silver chloride. From these ores, about the world's silver is extracted. As for the remaining 2/3, it is obtained from the ores of lead, zinc, and copper, which contain a very small percentage of silver. An Egyptian gold usually contains a large percentage of silver between 10% and 23%, and this percentage is what was found in the newly extracted Egyptian gold, and a large percentage of silver was also found in the gold that was found in the archaeological discoveries. And Professor Petrie says, 144 that the silver that was used in Egypt since the pre-dynastic era was likely to have been brought from Syria, and this is the reason for its rare use, and this opinion is reinforced by the documents that we received from the 18th dynasty, which is the era of the great conquests in Asia, so it is not far off, then, that the ships the one that sailed the sea towards the coasts of Phoenicia in the exiled era to bring the Lebanese wood, she also carried silver with her. However, Lucas 145 says, this metal was extracted from Egypt itself until the era of the 18th dynasty, and this is the secret that we find ancient documents silent about the origin of the source of silver until this era, and then it was mentioned to us that it was brought to Egypt from Assyria and the country Qaida, the two rivers, the country of Rutno, and Zahi, Syria, and all these regions in Asia. During the 19th dynasty, silver was brought from the land of the god, Bint, the country of Qaida and the two rivers, as well as from Libya, located in the northwest of Egypt. Lucas believed that there was no doubt that in Egypt and Asia there were alloys of gold and silver similar in nature to electrum metal, and these alloys had a great amount of silver in them, which gave them a white silver color, and that these alloys were the ancient silver, and the Egyptians called it white gold. It seems that this saying is close to the truth, as we find that all the silver that was found in ancient Egypt contains a great percentage of gold, sometimes reaching 38.1%. The Egyptians knew how to silver copper with silver foil, as Brenton found a copper jug with a thin layer of silver on it, dating back to the era of the Second Dynasty. The most important use of silver in the past was to make beads, jewelry, cups, and utensils. And it was hammered like gold into thin paper and used to cover wood, as seen in one of the coffins of Uya from the 18th dynasty, and one example was found of using silver to solder copper. Tin. The history of the discovery of tin in Egypt is very ambiguous, and we also do not know for certain which of the two metals was used first, bronze or tin, but it is very likely that bronze was used before tin was considered a single metal, and in that it is like brass, a mixture of red copper and zinc, that was known before zinc. However, the most important use of tin in Egypt was to make bronze. Although tin ore is not found in Egypt, the oldest use of this metal was in the Nile Valley. The first known thing in the world was made of tin, as far as we know, a ring of 148 and a water bottle that were found in Egyptian tombs from the 18th dynasty, 1580 to 1350 BC. Tin was used in Egypt in a small amount since the 18th dynasty onwards to whiten glass. 149 This metal was found in the tomb of Tutankhamun. 150 The oldest reference to tin in Egyptian inscriptions came in a paper of Hars dating back to the 20th dynasty. 151, however, the meaning of the word translated as tin is questionable. The scholars differed as to the source of the tin that was used in Egypt. But the research that has been done so far indicates that both the metals of tin and bronze were brought from Western Asia and that they were extracted from the northeast of Persia, where they are found in abundance. Northwest of the current town of Beirut. 153. Alum. The first reference to the existence of alum in Egypt came from the lips of Herodotus when he mentioned that King Amasis 154, 569 to 526 BC, had sent a quantity of it to Greece when rebuilding the Delphi temple and called it an astringent, alum. This mineral was also mentioned by the writer Roman Pliny in the 1st century Christian. He said that one of the most important sources of alum is Egypt. 155. Alum is found in the Dakhla Oasis and the Karga Oasis. The extraction of alum was mentioned in the books of Hadith scholars, such as Al-Makrizi 156, who says that he was sending to Egypt from the oases about 1,000 quintals of alum, and it is also located at a distance from the southwest of the waterfalls on a 10-day journey in the desert, and the amount extracted was part of the country's income, as mentioned. That Hamilton in the year 1809.157, and the most important use of it now is fixing colors. Natron. This material is now found in 3 parts of the Egyptian country, which are Wadi al-Natron, Al-Buhaira district, and Al-Kab district in Upper Egypt. Al-Kalkashandi, the Egyptian writer who lived in the 15th century, mentioned 2 other places from which natron was extracted. However, the most important place used by the ancient Egyptians was Wadi al-Natron and its vicinity in the Al-Buhaira Directorate, especially near Daman Hour. Natron was used in ancient Egypt in purification ceremonies. 158, especially for purifying the mouth. 159, for making incense, for making glass, for painting, and for cooking.